Hello chess friends and welcome to Out of Chess channel and welcome back to the Computer Bullet Chess Championship in 2022. So far we have reached the semi-final stage, and in the semi-finals, like usual, the Stockfish engine is in the lead. So we'll see now then who will move up to the finals. Probably in this season we'll see maybe the Stockfish engine against the Lila C0 engine. So I've sorted out now really a beautiful game from the semi-finals. It's Stockfish versus Berserk in the so-called Mongredien defense, and this defense we didn't cover so often here on my YouTube chess channel. The Mongredien defense is quite annoying. It's not something that you see many times. I've seen it several times played by Magnus Carlsen in some banter blitz sessions. So Magnus is playing this opening just for fun, hopes for the best of course, and then he's guiding many times also some wins in this opening because he's still the best player. But I wanted to show you how deep some of these ideas of the Mongredien defense can be, because I lost many games because I really didn't understand what's going on the board and got tricked many times into the main strategy of the Mongredien defense. So again, we'll have a little bit of theory of course, but then we'll see how Stockfish destroys this annoying stuff and how Stockfish is not allowing this dubious opening. So let's check out now what is the Mongredien defense and how Stockfish destroyed it. So here e4 is the first move. We have now the move g6, which is now the modern defense, but this modern defense will transpose into the Mongredien setup. So here we have d4, bishop to g7, and after move knight to f3 we have this is now the Mongredien defense, the double fianchetto. And now many times you see that black is playing the same setup. He's trying bishop to b7, b6, then he's trying a6, h6, and then e6, d6. And you see why this e6, d6 is possible, because for instance you could maybe try now like Stockfish did here, bishop to d3, which is perfectly fine, bishop to b7, kingside castling. So far normal development. We should not take control here immediately. We'll just play course normal development, nothing wrong with this. So here d6, and after move c3, which Stockfish played, rook to e1, maybe knight to d2, knight to f1, knight to g3 is also now a maneuver that white wants to get. So many times you see now, as I said, this formation, and what black is hoping for is that you expose yourself. What I mean about exposing yourself is that you play something like e5, then he'll simply pass through with the move d5. If you play something like, I don't know, d5, that's the beauty about this setup by black. Then he'll try simply e5, and he will reach now a good position like in the King's Indian. He would try maybe f5, f4, or similar stuff. In this scenario, after e5, d5, then he would reach an improved version of maybe the French defense, even the static French defense. Then with c5, c4 he could also get some spaces, although the evaluation is always better here for white. But many times black is hoping to fix then the center and then hope for the best. So this is one of the ideas of this types of structures. So after move e6, Stockfish played rook to e1, we have knight to e7. So many times black is trying to delay the castling situation, hopes that you expose yourself where you're going to attack and then castle out of the attack. So here after move knight to e7, Stockfish plays a4. So Stockfish is announcing that it is trying to attack the queen side. So that's why here after move a6, even if you try a5, then even in this scenario black will simply pass through with the move b5. So this is not a good opening, we have to say. The Mongredien defense is not a good opening, but there are really annoying ideas behind this types of structure. So now again black is hoping for to get a blocked pawn structure, is hoping to maybe reach now this position by playing c5, c4, and similar stuff. So as I said, if you don't know what you're doing, probably you could have several problems. So after move a6, here Stockfish played knight from b to d2, and now finally black castle kingside. So black delayed for many moves the castling situation, because now with the move a4, white already said I'm attacking the queen side, but now of course black wants to castle kingside, getting out of the attack. But that's exactly what is, I think, the worst about this opening. You have only your pawns on the 6th rank, you haven't played so far on the 5th rank any pawns, and this is quite a defensive setup. Even if you try knight to d7, notice now what Stockfish will do. Stockfish is saying, okay, you have castled kingside, but you didn't solve your problems, because I will attack you immediately on this side of the board. So that's now the downside, I think, about the setup when you don't play the knight on a natural move. The knight on f6 would always control the h5 square. That's now a huge different story, and even if you manage to protect it somehow with h5, if you are blocking the potential progress, then you weaken always a little bit too much your pawn structure in front of the king. So that's why this knight to e7 has to be treated as an inaccuracy, because the knight on f6 is much more powerful because it stops always the potential progress of white. So that's why Stockfish is saying, okay, you castled out of my attack, but still I wanted to attack you because it's not, you didn't solve your positional problems, you didn't solve anything, because look at this, how Stockfish will attack this passive setup. So here we have h6, we have knight to f1, so Stockfish maneuvers now easily the pieces towards the king side. Look at this, the bishop gets liberated, this bishop is aiming already there, so it has to be liberated with some e5 ideas. And now with knight to g3, knight to f3, this is now perfect attacking formation. So we have now knight to d7, we have b4, here we have an expansion also a little bit of on the queen side, king to h8, and now rook to a2. This was really a beautiful move, because Stockfish is saying, I don't have to connect my rooks by playing a bishop move. I can also include my rook into the game without touching the bishop, because the bishop has already a beautiful activity here. So it doesn't have to be necessarily moved just in order to activate itself. So the bishop can be, of course, even on c1, a perfectly fine piece, because it's a long range piece, and it doesn't have to be moved immediately. So after move rook to a2, we have rook to b8, and now h5. If you take, of course, g takes h5, then you see there are so many weaknesses. h6 is weak, h5 is weak, knight to g3 will happen, knight to h5, so the game is strategically lost here for black. So after move h5, we have now g5. Again, this idea, when white pushes the pawn, then black is hoping to pass through. But now look at this, we have the so-called hook here, and the hook is this setup h6 g5, and you can guess what will happen around the square g5. There are many tactical ideas around the square, so this is maybe something that should be considered here, a tactical shot around the square g5. So here we have bishop to b1. Stockfish is trying queen to d3, e5, even some checkmate threats around the square h7. So that's why we have c5, queen to d3, and now the Berserk engine realizes its problem is trying to maneuver the knight on f8, where it controls, of course, for the h7 square. So we have now e5, knight to f8 has to be played, and now comes, of course, the stunner, knight to g5, this immediate knight sacrifice. So this is now really the downside of this opening. I think here Stockfish exposes all of the weaknesses of this dubious opening. This is something that I would not recommend you. I've played it several times in Blitz Bullet, in some bars, had even some good success, but I would not dare to play this opening from black's perspective, maybe in a classical time format game. So here after move knight to g5, h takes g5, bishop to g5, we have d takes e5, but now h6 also traps now the bishop, the dark bishop of black. So we have here f6, we have now bishop to d2. Stockfish is staying active with the pieces and is getting now the queen on the h file, now with the support of the bishop. Also the rook can be included into the game, so this is now a perfect setup. So we have here knight to g6, queen to h3, rook to g8, and now after move d takes e5, here the Berserk engine try to escape, try to create a block pawn structure, because if you try knight to e5, then we still can take king to g7, and now rook to e5 is here even an opportunity, because the knight is controlling this very important g6 square, f7 square. Now after f takes e5, we can take out this pawn, and the king is again naked. We can also try, if you try to escape here, bishop to h6, queen to h6, many opportunities here again for white. So black is losing the game tactically for sure. So here after move rook to g8, we have now, as we said, d takes e5, f5. It seems so that maybe Berserk has defended this position, because here at least the pawn structure is healthy again, the knight is controlling also the f5, but Stockfish continues with the normal move, h takes g7, king to g7, and now bishop to g5. Look at the dark square problems that black is here. It's a completely disaster position here for black. So here after move bishop to g5, king to f7, we have a rook to d2. You know, when Stockfish plays this rook list, you can expect this rook will come active into the game in one moment. So now rook to d2 comes really in a beautiful way. Here we have queen to c7, and now queen to g3, protecting first the pawn on e5. So we have here rook to g7, rook from e to d1, and now after move knight to e5, it seems so in the beginning that something went wrong here for Stockfish, because now the pawn is taking. You can now maybe pause the video and try to see now the best continuation here for white. It's not so easy maybe to see, but it's a brilliant tactic that Stockfish has prepared here. So as I said, take your time, pause the video, try to see now a beautiful tactical shot. So Okay, Stockfish played the brilliant rook to d6, cutting off the connection between the queen and the knight. You could maybe try to get back with the knight here on g6, but now the problem is this stunning tactic, bishop to f5. So everything is perfectly protected around the square f5, but bishop to f5 works anyway. And whatever you do, if you try e takes f5, then you get rook to f6, the discovered check, and also the queen is hanging. Even if you take here with the knight, the similar tactic will happen. Then of course rook to d7 wins the game, because we have a check, but also the queen is hanging. So as I said, many beautiful tactical shots are possible. So rook to d6 creates now really madness all over the board, because knight to f3 is now the forced move in order to stay in the game. We have g takes f3, bishop to d5. So here Berserk traps the rook, but now Stockfish grabs another piece, so Stockfish gain now 2 minor pieces for the rook. We have knight to d5, and after queen to c7, knight to c7, this rook comes very active into the game. We have rook to d7, king to f8, and now Stockfish trades off the rooks, because of course the bishop was hanging. So again, you see how the tactical sequence is spread all over the board. Rook to g7, we have king to g7, and now bishop to f4, pinning the knight. Forces now the move rook to c8, of course. Okay, let's stop and evaluate the position. This is not an easy win, of course. You have 2 minor pieces for the rook, but I think white would love to have maybe the queen still on the board, because then the game would be more complicated. Now white hopes for the best. Here Stockfish plays simply b takes c5. If you take, of course, b takes c5, then both of these pawns are weaknesses. Bishop to e5 could happen, knight to e3, knight to c4. So many weaknesses in black's camp. So these are also isolated pawns that can be attacked, of course, by many of these minor pieces, as I said. Here, for instance, my Stockfish engine at home shows that it's already a +3 evaluation here for white. So after move b takes c5, here the Berserk engine tried also to spice up some things and to create maybe also a pass form for itself. So that's why after a takes b5, we have knight to b5, and you see now Berserk has also here annoying pass pawn on the a file. So we have now c4, kicking away the knight, knight to a7, and now bishop to e3. Very important to protect now this pawn. We have king to f6, perfectly fine to play actively with the king. So bishop to c2, knight to c6, knight to d2. Stockfish is playing now with every piece. We have knight to b4, and now bishop to a4, including now also the bishop into the attack. So knight to d3, attacking the pawn, but now with c6 everything is compact, everything is glued together here by the Stockfish engine. So after move e5 was played by Berserk, and now very important move that stops a little bit the progress here on the king side, f4, because whatever happens, even if you take knight to f4, then bishop to f4, e takes f4 is perfectly fine. These are 2 pawns, but these are double pawns, so it doesn't matter. We'll simply play with our king here on f3, then play something like maybe knight to b3, knight to d4. We'll push eventually this pawn, and with the support of the 2 minor pieces, this could be a promoted pawn, so it will be probably game over. So even if you try here e takes f4, maybe to attack the bishop, then it doesn't matter. We have still bishop to b6, bishop to a7. We can then push c7, bishop to d7, so it's also a serious threat here. So after move f4, we have king to e7, f takes e5, knight to e5, and now simply c5, knight to c6, and now knight to c4. So Stockfish lost the pawn, but now gained, I think, a much better piece setup here, so it's perfectly fine. Now knight to d6 will happen, or knight to b6, so these 2 squares are very important that are controlled by the pawn on c5. So we have here knight to b4, knight to b6, attacking the rook, rook to g8, not a problem, king to f1. We have now rook to g6, attacking the knight, but now bishop to f4 is preparing, of course, this move, bishop to d6, which could cut off here the 6th rank, and then we could maybe push this pawn further. So it's very important to make something with this pawn. So we have here a5, we have bishop to d6, we have king to f7, bishop to d7 is attacking, of course, this weak pawn on f5. We have a rook to h6, and now king to e2. Here Stockfish doesn't want to take immediately, is first trying to improve a little bit the king's activity. So knight to a6, we have knight to c4, king to f6, and now simply c6 is, of course, much better here for white. it's completely winning endgame here for the Stockfish engine. So rook to h7, knight to a5, we have rook to h8, and now c7, we have knight to c7, bishop to c7. Now Stockfish has 3 minor pieces for the rook, and of course a completely winning endgame. So here rook to g8, we have a bishop to f5. This is a move that I really didn't understand, although it's still a winning game for Stockfish, but I'm not sure if Stockfish was even mocking here the Berserk engine, giving up just the bishop like this. Again, I'm pointing out this is winning for Stockfish, but as I said, this was really unnecessary. There are many better moves. You can play knight to c6, you can include maybe the piece here, you can play bishop to g3 or similar stuff. So many great ways, but actually bishop to f5 is a mistake, as is evaluated as a mistake here in my analysis at home. But as I said, still a winning game for white. So after move bishop to f5, we have rook to g1. Again, Stockfish, look what Stockfish does here. Bishop to e5. Again, sacrifices sort of the bishop, but this is not good, of course. King to f7. Here again, Berserk is declining to take the piece. I'm not sure if these engines are drunk or something. What did they do here? But as I said, this was simply incredible what happened in the continuation of the game. So king to f7, we have knight to c4, king to e7, and now bishop to f6. Again, Stockfish is trying just to get the piece somehow, to sacrifice the piece, and again, Berserk is not accepting it. I'm not sure what's going on here. So king to f8, we have king to bishop to e7. Again, the same idea, sort of. We have now king to g7, and now knight to e5. We have rook to c1, f4, we have rook to h1, and now bishop to d7. Now Stockfish pushed the pawn further. We have now knight to f3, very important to cut off here the connection between the rook and the pawn, and now we want to just push the pawn further. Rook to c1, f6, we have knight to e5, and now simply f7, we have rook to e1, king to f4, now check, but now with knight to f3, the game is over. Rook to c1, bishop to g4, now check, promotion here of the queen, king to h5, and after queen to h8, it was game over. So I'm not sure what happened in the end, why Stockfish 3 times sacrificed the piece, and why the Berserk engine didn't take it. Probably Stockfish wanted to reach maybe a table-based position, which Stockfish has of course somewhere memorized, maybe to reach a position that Stockfish knows that it's winning. So maybe it was this kind of an idea, I'm not sure. But as I said, brilliant game again by the fish, and again, especially against this kind of a defense that you will probably face many times, and you could have some problems if you don't know what you're doing. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed the game. I really enjoyed it a lot. I think you used many of these methods in order to beat this annoying defense. If you want to see more brutal attacks like this, check out my Comment to Chess Games Played by Computer series with some more games played by Stockfish, Alpha Zero, Lila Zero, and many more. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.